Good morning, everyone. We're talking about the blessings that Bilam, evil Bilam, arch Jew hater, tremendously successful destroyer, gave to the Jewish people. He tried to curse the Jews, and it didn't work out. And for sure, if his curses didn't work out, so no one's curses are going to work out because he was foolproof cursor. For sure, the world is full of a lot of fools today, and they're all trying to curse the Jews. If it didn't work for Bilam, it's not going to work for you. So let's have a little glimpse of what happens when curses are transformed into blessings. So one of the things that Bilam said, first of all, Bilam prophesied very clearly about Mashiach coming. So most of the prophecies, and to the degree that even the Maimonides, Moses ben Maimon, that he wrote is the definitive law book in Judaism. There's 14 volumes that cover every law possibly in the Torah. Every law. There's no other book like that. Even laws that don't exist now, in the time of the temple only they existed, and they will exist when Mashiach builds the third temple, and all these laws, everything the Rambam brings. And when in the end he talks about Mashiach, at very end, the Rambam, Maimonides. And Maimonides says that anyone who doesn't believe in Mashiach or await his arrival, he's denying the whole Torah. In other words, you can basically throw away all the 14 previous books because the Mashiach is the whole spirit and the whole goal of the whole entire business. And then he says that he starts to explain what Mashiach is and the criteria for Mashiach. And he said, and how do I know there's going to be Mashiach? How do I know there's such a thing? So he says the whole Torah is filled with it, filled with prophecies about Mashiach. And Bilam, he says, Bilam even prophesied about two Mashiachs. One Mashiach was David, King David. He was one Mashiach. And the other Mashiach is going to be Mashiach ben David, that he is going to come and redeem all the Jewish people. So whoever's going, that's one of the criteria of Mashiach, by the way, in addition to have all these personality traits and accomplishments and abilities and talents, that he knows the whole Torah and he teaches the Torah and he tries to gather all the Jews together, but he has to be a direct descendant from King David. Some say through King Solomon. And so that's, the first thing you have to look for, is this person a descendant of King David? And if he is, of course, that's just in one of the many criteria. So, I mean, incidentally, the Lubavitcher Rebbe and all the Rebbes of Chabad are direct descendants from the Maharal of Prague, who was a direct descendant of King David. He had a family tree. So they're all direct descendants of King David. Okay. So King David was the first Messiah, and the last Messiah is going to be the Mashiach that's going to come and redeem all the people. So he says, what's the big deal about the Jewish people? What do you mean he's going to read this? He says, the whole world depends on the Jewish people. The whole world. You want to have a good world? The world depends on the Jewish people. You want to have a world the way it is now, where there's terrible depression and aggression and depression and what is it? And addictions and wars and suicide and terrible things are going on in the world. Lies, filled with lies. Everyone's lying up and down. You want to have a world like that, then you don't need Mashiach. But if you want the world to be a true world, and you want people to realize how valuable this world, and not have all these religions that try to take you out of the world and philosophies that say that you should, there is no plan to the world should just be a jungle. If that's what you want, then you don't need Mashiach. But if you want the world to be a world where there is true meaning and that every moment is meaningful, everything is meaningful, then you need Mashiach. Okay, so and that depends on the Jewish people. That's the way God made the world. I didn't do it that way. If I would have done it that way, I maybe wouldn't have created the world at all. But God did. He created the whole entire world, and he's creating the whole world every moment. So one of the blessings that Bilam gives, he says, who can count the dirt of Jacob? Huh? What type of blessing is that? Or who can count or number the four of the Jewish people. Number four. At Rova B'nai Yisrael. Some people say even 1/4 of the Jewish people, or the number four of the Jewish people. What does that mean? The quarter. Just say, who can count the number of Jews? What does it mean? The dirt and what is it? So the Rebbe says Bilam is hinting at a fourth level of service of God, which is only present by the Jewish people. A fourth level of service of God that's only present by the Jewish people. The Jewish people and everybody in the world really is here in order to serve the Creator. Serving the Creator, one of the best ways of doing it, I mean, the goal of it is to make this world a good place, a perfect place, not to go to heaven. We're not in this world for ourselves, even though we get benefit from it, but that's not the reason we're here. According to Judaism, we said this before, everybody is essentially good. There's no such thing as original sin, and you got to be saved and all this stuff. Not. You have to be saved from ignorance. That's true. You have to be educated. But you don't get punished. Exactly the opposite. If a person is not educated and he does bad things, so he doesn't get punished, or it's not as severe, whatever it is. Not educated. You didn't know any better, right? You were educated that you had to kill people. So the punishment that mitigates the punishment, at least. That stands moot, but nevertheless, a lack of education mitigates the. So no such thing as an original sin. Everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to go to hell, something like that. If you don't believe X or Y, everybody's going to remain in ignorance if you don't get educated. That's for sure. That's for sure. You have to educate yourself. So that's the purpose of the Jewish people, is to educate the whole world. And so it says, what are we supposed to educate the whole world? Who they are, what reality really is. So it says there's three types of reality, and the Jews are privy to the fourth. And reality means being aware of God. So the Rebbe said there's God's thought, God's speech, and God's action. God's speech we already know about, right? He created the world. God spoke, created the world. God's action also, like you say, the world is created. And here is a world. God's creating the world. What's God's thought? So it says God's thought is how everything comes from nothing. So that's like the spiritual worlds. More exactly, the action is like this physical world, and the thought and the speech of God, that's like the upper spiritual worlds. Okay, so that's what it means. Okay, now let's go. That's what we learned yesterday. Now let's turn the page, just that everybody gets, so you know what we're talking about here. 1 second, next page. Okay. So he said, what are these four letters? So the Rebbe explains, God, in order to create the world, he creates the world through words, letters. That's what it says in the Bible. Letters are units of creative energy. That God is creating the world. There's different types of letters. Like you see, there's letters written on a page. There's letters that you speak, and there's letters that you think. These three types of letters are also correspondingly with God. God creates a physical world. God's speech is what created the physical world, but God's thought is the source of this. So thought, like in a person, it draws from your soul, that it comes out relevant to be speech. So usually you only speak what you have in your mind, what you have in your thoughts, unless a person is not normal. Your person speaks what he has in his mind. He thinks about it first. But what is in his mind, his thoughts, they seem to come from nowhere, right? That's like what was in his soul. All of a sudden pops up these thoughts, and thoughts don't even necessarily have meaning to them. And I'm sorry, don't have any words. Don't have any words, no letters. Sometimes a person can think about a thing without any letters. Music, art. He has an idea in his mind of beauty, of harmony, and there's no letters there. It could be that it's not, just as a general sort of a feeling. Sometimes even more. A person can have, they say that one of the rabbis of Chabad, he had one idea, and from that came 4 years of speeches that he gave. 4 years, one idea. So sometimes one little idea can give birth to a lot. But where does the idea come from? Where's the idea come? So that comes from from nowhere. Oh, so this, in a way, the everyone is privy to this. Everyone, even a non-Jew, right, can understand that the world comes from nothing. It's an idea, and God is creating the world, right? God is creating the world every second. He's creating it from nothing. He's creating you, and you are very important to God. A non-Jew can understand this. A Jew has a fourth level. Okay, so what's this fourth level? Here we go. Now we're getting to it. Now we're getting to the fourth level. Are you ready? Yes. Let's see. Fourth level. 1 second. 1 minute. I was almost. I guess I have to do this. All right. And what's the fourth level? Good morning. After these true words that I just spoke, explaining how the world is created and the spiritual levels with God's thought and God's speech and God's action, and that people can think about this, they can understand it. It's amazing. It's awesome that God, every human being can say, "Wow, God is creating me right now for every single second," and He can sense a little tiny bit of this God's speech and God's thought, even a little bit. Says, but there's a fourth level. Now we're going to get to that, and that only the Jews have, and that's what Bilam saw. After these true words we just said, we have to understand what is this tosfos Eloi. What is the advantage to the soul coming into this world when it's in the body? The soul, before it came into the body, it was very well aware of God's speech and thought and God's action. He knew all these things. Why put the soul into the body? We're talking about the Jews. Why put the Jewish souls into the body? Why? Why should they be here? They were already attached to God's speech, God's action, God's thought. They knew that there is such a thing, right? And they weren't confused by the world. You come into the world and your soul is put into a body, and your body is part of the world. So your soul already has a certain loyalty to the world, and it's connected to the world. And it doesn't want to defy the world. It means you're defying yourself. You're defying your own urges and your own ideas and your own feelings. And the soul, before it comes into the body, there's no defiance, there's no opposition to the truth. When the soul is put into the body, so suddenly it forgets about God's thought and God's speech and God's action even. You don't even know that there's God. Maybe there's no God at all. It says, why did God do it? Why does God put us in the body? When the soul is in its source, how you saw it was kalula, included, and it was united in God's infinite one light in a clear way. You were up there in God's thought. You weren't just aware of it. You were part of God's thought. Especially the Jews. This is the Jews. They rose up in God's thought. Yisrael olu b'machshava, it says. The Jewish people, they were in what's called the concealed worlds, above from this name of God. We said all the creations of God come from God's words, letters. That's God's names. The word of God in the revealed worlds. So why does God put the soul into the body? Why does He do it? But it says, Yached levavi, unite my heart, liyira et shemecha, to fear your name. Yached levavi liyira shemecha, unify my heart to fear your name, God. King David, and also we also pray the brachas and the blessing of Ahavat Olam. In the morning, we say two blessings before we say Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is supposed to be a very emotional experience. We're supposed to come to love God with all of our heart, our soul, our might. In order to love God, you have to think about God. There has to be something there to love. So there's two blessings that we say before Shema in the morning. And this talks about the angels and how good the angels are all screaming out to God and how real God is and how amazing God is. He's more amazing than the angels, and how God took us out of Egypt and God gave us the Torah. And then, the second blessing, when we talk about God taking us out of Egypt and giving us the Torah, and that's the second blessing. That's a blessing called Ahavat Olam. And in this blessing, we say, God, unify my heart. Yached levavi, unify my heart. to love you. Yachad levavenu. There it says unify our hearts. Because when we pray for all the Jewish people. I mean, essentially, we're praying for all mankind, but there's some blessings which are really only relevant to the Jews. The Indian is like this. What does it mean to unify my heart? The Indian is like this. Tiyesh bechinas reuta deliba. There is what's called the arousal of the heart. What does it mean? The arousal, there's some things, we'll talk about this in the opposite way, but there's sometimes a person desires something, and it's very difficult to control this desire. Why? Because it snaps on a person, it catches him. Right? Ruta deliba, an arousal of the heart. This is like my identity. This is who I am. Shehu ratzon alev. This is the desire of the heart. V'yesh b'zeh beit bechinot. There's two levels. Penimiyut v'chitzoniyut. There's what's called the inner point of the heart and the external point of the heart. Penimiyut nekudat alev, the inner point of the heart. This is tremendous love of God. Shalomayla mitam v'dat, which is above any logic. Ubo, and it comes milamayla, from above, in a gift. Love. Okay, so again, what is really love? What is love? There's two types of love. I'll tell you the joke. I probably told this joke 15 times, but I'll tell you it again. A rabbi walks by a restaurant and he sees the president of the synagogue sitting. There's a joke, right? Joke. Rabbi walks by a restaurant and he happens to look in the window, and he sees the president of his synagogue sitting and eating fish with his hands, stuffing his mouth with fish. He's got this bib on, and the waiters are standing around him with plates just ready to give him a fish, and he's just sitting there eating and stuffing his mouth, and everyone in the restaurant is watching him. And once in a while, he washes off his hands. Another waiter comes and he gives him some water, washes him, puts a new bib on, and he's stuffing him. So the rabbi goes over to him and says, "Mr. Grois, stop it. What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, Rabbi, sit down. Give one of the fish to the rabbi." The rabbi says, "Rabbi," says, "you're embarrassing the synagogue. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't want to have any connection with you." He said, "But Rabbi, I love fish. I love fish." Said Mr. Grois, "No, I see that not only are you acting like an animal, but you're also a liar." I said, "What?" Says, "You're lying. If you really loved the fish, you would let the fish eat you. But you love yourself. That's why you're eating the fish." And as a joke, I thought it was funny when I heard it. What does it mean that if a person, love means to appreciate something in another and wanting to benefit that other? That's what love is. Love means that you appreciate, you see something good and the other something valuable, and you want to benefit that person. That's called love. Then there's another type of love. This person, like, he loved the fish. He sees something good in the fish. They're very tasty, and he wants it, but he wants it for himself. So there's two types of love. There's genuine love, where you really want to benefit the other, or there is selfish love, where you want to benefit yourself. Right? So one of it is you see what's good in the thing, and the other one is you see what's good for you. Okay, but love, it has to be that you value something. So it has to be something for you that you value, something that you value. Professor Viktor Frankl talks about this a lot. What is genuine love? He says over there's three types of love. There's physical love, then there's emotional love, and then there's true love, right? There's a spiritual love, where physical love, it depends on the person being there. And also emotional love, even though it doesn't depend so much on how the person looks or whatever, but the person has to be there for you till you have to receive something. But the other type of love is you can love a person even if the person is not there, right? A person loves his parents even if they're dead. You can love, right? That's appreciating the good inside of it. Here, the Rebbe is adding on another type of a love, and that is to benefit the other person. All you want is to benefit, and that's really, especially by God. By God, that you don't care about yourself. Parents don't care about themselves; they just want to benefit their children, right? Okay, but maybe you can say, listen, he wants to benefit his child because he knows he's going to die, and his child will carry it on. But there's Jews that are willing to give their lives for God with no remuneration. They're willing to give up everything. And really, that's the secret of self-improvement. Genuine self-improvement is that I want to do what the Creator wants. I want the Creator to be happy. I want the Creator to be happy. That's why you're created. That's the real you. The real you is not to be a drug addict or to be a this. That's not the real you. The real you is that you're here in order that every moment is an amazing gift, and just to realize the gift, that be gratitude to the Creator, right? So it means that you love God because He's creating you, because of how good He is. But the main thing is you want to give to God, and there's this idea of giving to God. There's higher and higher levels until it comes to the level of a Jew, and this is only by the Jews, that they don't care at all about themselves. They only care, they're not interested in going to heaven. It doesn't enter into their mind the thought of going to heaven or going to hell. Just to do what God wants because that's what God wants. That's a tremendous level of love. And we see Judaism is based on that. Abraham, God said, take your son and kill him. And he was the promise of Judaism. He was the future of Judaism. His son, Isaac, was 37 years old at the time. Abraham wasn't going to have any more children. If he would kill Yitzchak, that would be the end of everything. And Abraham put so much effort and prayer and self-sacrifice that Yitzchak should be born. Abraham even circumcised himself at 99 years old. And God said, take him and kill him. Okay, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do, God. What happened? What happened? From love. Actually, when he took and sacrificed his son, this is another side of that love, which is called fear that comes from love. In other words, Abraham went against his nature. Abraham went totally against his nature, risking everything because of the love of God. That's what he had for God. And for sure, he wasn't thinking about going to heaven. If Abraham killed his son, Yitzchak, in order to go to heaven, so he comes out like being a monster. Abraham was a monster. He wanted to kill his son to go to heaven. No, that was not his motivation at all. The basis of truth is that you do things for God, only for God, without thinking about going to heaven. It could be that if Abraham killed his son, he would have gone to hell. I don't know. You can't kill people just because God tells you to. You get a message. There was the 7 Noahide commandments. You can't kill people. The Lord told me. Okay, the Lord told you to kill, but you're going to go to hell. You went against it. I don't know. I never saw anything written about that. But for sure, Abraham did not make that calculation. And that's the basis of Judaism. That's what's called Ru'uta Daliba, the arousal of the heart. Shehu Ratzon, this is the will of the heart. And there is in this 2 levels, the external and the internal. The inner point of the heart is tremendous love, which is above any sort of logic, against logic. And it is a gift that comes from above. Matana. Like it says, Avodat matana etein kunatchem. Just like everything we have is a gift, right? That we have teeth in our mouth and we have eyes in our head. It's all a gift. Everything we have is a gift. This is also a gift. It's a gift in serving God. In serving God. That's what's called the internal essence of the heart. This can only be achieved by the soul being in the body and meeting the challenges of the body. There's also what's called external love of God. This is taken from Dat v'hitponenu. This is taken by thinking about greatness of God. Each one according to his ability. A non-Jew can also have a degree of this. You think, am I really being created by God? God is really creating everything. That's pretty amazing, right? Am I really essentially good? And God is really, I just have to feel a little bit of believe. that God is creating all being, and he's creating all being for a purpose. Everyone, that's the external part of the heart. This is appreciation of God. That's what I'm talking about. The internal, that's talking about appreciation to the degree that you totally give yourself over to God. Lefi, because and this is the second type of external love of God. This is according to your intellect and your understanding in the infiniteness of God. This is what the whole world is going to be doing when Mashiach comes. That's what we're doing now, at least we're trying to. This arouses, you can arouse yourself, the love of God in your heart. That's why it says that it's a commandment to love. How can you command somebody to love? So the commandment is to think and to meditate and to contemplate. Is this really real? Am I really being created by God? Is God really creating everything? Is God creating everything for a purpose? For a purpose. Did God really give the Torah? Did God really choose the Jews? God really wants this world to be a perfect place. Is that really true or not? Think about it. And when a person thinks about it properly, if it is true, then this is God is pretty good. That comes to love. But that's a type of a love from the external heart. The internal heart, this is a gift given to the Jews. It's known that everything that God made inside of good, he made it in the opposite. That's why there's evil in the world, because there's good in the world. Which, by the way, that's why there's anti-Semitism. I don't know why they call it anti-Semitism. Where did this world come from? I mean, am I a Semite? Go up to a person. Can you tell me where the Semites are? Right? Semites are. Right? I had a friend that was a Semite. Can you tell me where he lived? What's a Semite? What's a Semite? A Semite trailer? Does a Semite? What is a Semite? What does it mean? What does a Semite mean? It's just confusing the whole issue. Okay, not to get political about the whole thing, but that's why people hate Jews. Why do they hate Jews? Because Jews are good, and everything that God made in the world, he made opposites. That's the way God, that's part of God's goodness, is that everything he made in the world, he made an opposite. If you ask me, I don't think it's so good. But if you ask any sports fan, he'll tell you that it's very good. Because if you go on the sports field and there's only one person playing, then it's not interesting. Even in the whatever is the shot put or whatever they're going against the previous guy who has some sort of a record they're trying to break. There has to be some sort of a competition in order for life to be. There has to be some sort of an opposition, some sort of pressure in order something to get done that you have to overcome that makes life worthwhile. Okay, so I don't know if sports is the thing. I mean, sports, it might be that it's a replacement to people for they don't have real, they say, challenges in their life. So they call it, they identify with their team. Let's not get psychological about the whole thing. But the fact of the matter is that when there is opposition, so something new comes out. Something new comes out. You have a battle, you have victory, whole new thing comes out. And that's the whole thing. God, everything God put in the world that's good, he put the opposite in the world also. Just like there is dat b'kedusha, just like there is connection to God. In holiness, also l'dat Hashem, to know God, a connection to God that brings love, and it brings even sometimes insane love. Also the same thing, to love God. Also there is dat mitzvah klipa, that people love themselves. Klipa means you love yourself. Selfishness. And this is dat ra, this is what's called bad. That a person loves all sorts of weird things. Letava bakesh nifrad. Like it says, desire wants to be separate. I think it's a sentence in Mishlei, Proverbs. Because it gives him pleasure. Metikos olam hazeh, the pleasure of this world and its pleasure. So there's all big movements nowadays, which the only thing good about them is they just offer pleasure. And there's no meaning and there's no future and it's self-destructive, but it gives you pleasure. Right? Taking drugs is one of all this LGBT stuff. It's just pleasure, and it's totally destructive. There's absolutely nothing good that comes out of it except for pleasure. That's all. There's no future. There's no future. And says the Rebbe, that's the opposite of good, of godliness. But people are insanely in love with themselves, just like people can be insanely in love with God. In fact, this is what the Tanya is written for people just like this. The Tanya is written for people that have an inner battle, and it's very, very difficult to discern, And when you do discern what's good and what's bad, then to realize that the bad sometimes is what feels good. And sometimes the good is what feels bad. Abraham taking his son to kill him did not feel good, right? On the other hand, doing sins, we just finished, we're going to learn at the end of this week's Torah portion. The Jews sinning with the daughters of Midian, it says, and God got very angry. It felt good, right? They did what felt good. So not always. That's not a sign. We're not talking about being, in the Indian religions, these Hindus, they sit on, nails or whatever. They eat bottles, broken bottles, to make yourself feel bad. To put on barbed wire undershirts or something like that. No, feeling bad is not necessarily good. It's just saying that there's sometimes that things that really feel good can be bad. So if you get pleasure out of a thing, that's not the measuring stick if it's good or not. So hine zui mira beinonis. This is what's called the beinoni, the average Jew. Zev is a shoftan. They have two voices in their head that are giving them advice. Yamatz. That's Esav and Yaakov. We did this told out. One is against the other. One stands up, the other one falls. That's what's called the natural, worldly, selfish love. And it's very, very encouraged, right, in the movies and everything like that. Love, which is in the inside of the heart. Which is above understanding. But it comes from above. It's a gift. Matana, and a gift. There is nothing opposite. Because the inner point of the heart, this is what's called yechida. It only has one will, in your Father in heaven. Okay, so this is predicated on the fact that there is truth and that God really does exist. You don't have to believe in him if you don't want. You can believe in whatever you want. That's called strange service, avoda zara. It's called strange service. But if the fact of the matter is, God does exist, and the fact of the matter is that God does create everything, and the fact of the matter is that God did take the Jews out of Egypt and he gave them the Torah, and God is creating everyone. That's the fact. That's the fact. And when a person feels this fact, so now it depends on how deep you feel it. If you just feel it in your mind, so there's other ideas also, nice idea. But if you really feel the truth of it, the truth of the idea, then it's unshakable. You can't come along and say, no, I'm the truth. I see the truth. I told you the story about, maybe I'll tell it in a short way. The Jonathan Eibeshitz. This should be the story for the day, but I won't. Jonathan Eibeshitz, he was a very precocious child. He was a genius and very clever. Even when he was like 3 years old. So he lived in Prague. So I guess his father was the rabbi of the city. And the king heard about the wisdom of this child. And of course, the kings were tremendously bored. So he said, I want you to dress the child up and send him to my castle. I want to see him. So the father said, okay. He said, no, but 1 second. You have to dress him up and send him in the streets alone. Nobody should go with him. And let him see if he can find a way to the palace or to whatever it is, to the king's house. Someplace that was not obvious. You couldn't see it. And the streets are all winding into the. So sure enough, he sent him, and the king, and he arrived. After about an hour, he arrived, and everybody was amazed. A little child, he's like, 3 feet tall or whatever, and he's walking, dressed very majestically. And the king said, how did you know how to arrive here? So he said, well, I asked people. He said, but a lot of times you ask people and they say different directions, right? He said, no, I always asked more than one person. I asked 2 people. So, well, what if each one says a different direction? So then I would ask a 3rd person. According to the Torah, you have to go into the majority. So everybody, snickered and laughed. The boy is really clever, give an answer to. So the king leans forward. He says, listen to what you just said. You have to go to the majority. He said, the majority of people are not your religion. The majority of people, they believe in the church, whatever, the Pope, whatever it is. They believe in him and that religion. They believe in that. And so you have to listen to the majority. So the boy said, no, you don't understand, Your Majesty. I'm sorry, I didn't make it clear. He said, when do you have to ask people and go according to the majority? If the way is not clear, if you don't see yourself. But if you see, for instance, now I'm standing in the palace in front of the king. If all of the king's horses and king's men, if everybody in the whole family of the entourage of the king tells me that I'm not in the palace of the king, I won't listen to them because I'm here. I'm here in the middle of, I don't listen. I only ask people if I'm uncertain. That God exists, I'm certain of. I don't have to ask people. I don't have to go according to the majority. Even if the whole world tells me that God is not alone, that there's another God, or whatever it is, something like that, then I don't have to listen to them. Right? I can't listen to them. So that's the point. When a person sees what the obvious truth is, so there's nothing opposite that. There's nothing opposite. That's what he says. Everything in the world has an opposition. As much love have you had for God. How do they say? Every person has his price. Every person has his price. I'll give you $10 million for your yeshivas, your yeshiva and your synagogues. Right? The person says, what do you think I am? I'm a prostitute on the street. You can buy me out. What about 50 million? Okay. Everybody has their price, right? Their price. And if I get $50 million, I can build yeshivas. I'll be famous. I'll have pupils. I have this and that, right? Isn't it worthwhile? It says everything has its price. Unless a person, as soon as a person realizes the essence of God, what God is and the truth of God, then there's no opposite. Then a person says, whatever God wants, that's what I have to do. So they come to you and they say, you have yeshivas, you have your institutions. I see that they're floundering. I'll give you $1 million if you just come into the church and say, this is also a true way. I can't do it. If you don't do it, I'll put you in jail. I can't do it. Why not? Because there's only one truth, and I can't leave the truth. It doesn't make any difference what I get or if I'm bad or good. I can't leave the truth. The truth is the truth. I can't deny the truth, right? Can't deny the truth. That's sort of what's going on now. You know, a man is not a man, a woman is not a woman. Deny the obvious facts. No problem. Whatever I feel, here we're talking about the opposite. Once a person sees God, it doesn't make any difference what he feels. It doesn't make any difference. The truth is not just an idea. It says that's the level which is only present by the Jewish people. And that's actually the big reason why people hate the Jews. Because this level of devotion to God and that there is reality, people don't like to hear that. You want to tell me that God gave the Torah? I have no choice. I have the absolute good. You want to tell me that God took the Jews out of Egypt? He's the only God, absolute truth. I have to do the 7 Noahide commandments. You can't tell me what to do. People don't know. People don't like that there's absolute truth. Why people don't like? Because God made everything in the world one opposite the other, and being opposite God means you feel yourself. You feel good. You feel good. You get pleasure just by going against God. You're important. So he says, therefore, when a Jew is a pure representative of God, he says, then it arouses hatred, but nothing can stand against him. That's the secret of Daniel in the lion's den. When Daniel was in the lion's den, I mean, lions are not anti-Semites. Lions are just hungry. And by their nature, they couldn't eat Daniel. They couldn't devour him because there's nothing opposite the feeling of the oneness of God. When you feel it. And says that's the idea that eventually even death will be rid of the world. That's the level of yechida of the Jewish soul. There's 5 levels of the soul, and the highest is yechida. She'ein la ela ratzon echad. He only has one desire for his Father in heaven. There's nothing compared to it. Nothing compared to it at all. And that's this 4th level he was talking about. God's thought, speech, and action, and this aspect of God, which is the 4th level. We'll explain why 4. And this is found only in the Jewish people. Am Karovo. They're called these close people. Ki Am Kashe Oref. Who? Because the Jewish people are a stubborn people. What does it mean, stubborn? It means that once they make up their mind for something, whether it's good or not good, nothing can move them. So you can understand why they make up their mind for something that's not good. A person is just stubborn and he's just done. Why is it that a Jew is willing to give his life because of his stubbornness? What does he get out of that? Right? What does he get out of that? Usually if a person is stubborn for something, unless he believes he's going to go to heaven, something like that. But here we're talking about a Jew who doesn't necessarily believe he's going to go to heaven. He's not caring about that. He realizes the oneness of God. Nothing can move him. That's Abraham. That's what it means. A stiff-necked people means once they make up their mind for good, nothing can move them. What does it mean? Kasha orav bechinas ratzon shelamayla. This is above understanding. I mean, basically, this has been the history of the Jewish people. The Jewish people were born in tragedy. They were born in Egypt. And we have a million questions. Wait, there was the Holocaust and etc. And so we've got a million reasons not to serve God. And a lot of Jews took these reasons and made their movements out of it. But there was always Jews that said, listen, I'm not interested in reasons. I'm not interested in reason. I'm a Jew. Professor Viktor Frankl, he was in the Holocaust. He said that his opinion is that more Jews became strengthened in their connection to God by the Holocaust than weakened. We're not talking about they necessarily became religious. We're talking about they became believers in God. Why? Because they realized that God really exists and all these bad things that are happening are just unexplainable. They're unexplainable, but that does not in any way detract from the fact that there is truth and that the truth is good. And why there's bad things, I got a billion questions. But the fact of the matter is that does not in any way contradict the fact that there's a creator and that the creator is good. That's what it means that we are the Jewish people, what's called a stiff-necked people. It's a will which is above understanding. When this love is aroused, he can overpower and to overpower the good. The good is over the bad. Legamri, totally. So that's the secret of the Jewish people. There's no Babylonians around. They once ruled the world. There's no Romans around. They once ruled the world. The Greeks today are absolutely nothing compared to the Greeks that were in the time when they conquered the whole world and the Jewish people. And the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, they scattered the Jews all into Babylon, and the Romans destroyed the second temple. They scattered the Jews all over the place. Right? And here we are, we're still here, and the Romans are gone. How doesn't make any sense? Says it makes sense because the Jews are what's called a stiff-necked people. They hold on to their identity as being Jews, even if they're not religious. Even if they're not religious, they hold on. True, if they're not religious, it doesn't hold on that long because they intermarry. And as soon as the Jews intermarry, then if the mother is not Jewish, then the children don't have this feeling. The children are not privy to this feeling of self-sacrifice for Judaism. It means nothing to them because they're not Jews. But generally speaking, that's why Jews have existed, because of this feeling. And that's the blessing that Bilam is giving. There's a level in the Jewish people, in every Jewish soul, which selfishness, the world, has no effect whatsoever. They can't, the external forces can't affect it at all. That's what it means, unify my heart. That's what we said before, unify my heart. Yachid Avenu, unify our hearts. That the outer will that we have, that we think about God, and we love God, and we serve God for some reasons, should be united in Penimat Ratzon, in this inner, the truth of it. We see the truth that God really does exist. God really is the creator. God really did take the Jews out of Egypt. God really is creating us all every moment. When we feel this is the Af Asisi. This is the fourth level. And we said, Barativ Yatzartiv Af Asisi. He said, the whole world is created for my glory. He says, I created it, I formed it, I also made it. Says in this world of action, you can get this fourth level. She'af, this level, which is called Af, also This indicates on another level, and this is this upper will, the upper love of God, which is above any sort of thought, speech, and action. So that's the inner love of God, which is inside of every Jew, which that connects to this inner aspect of God, which is above even God's thought. Where is this revealed? Af asisiv, only in this physical world. Only in this physical world. That's why death is not a good thing in Judaism. Not a good thing. We're not looking forward to dying. We're not looking for to die and sanctify God's name. We're not looking forward to it. If that's what we have to do. But death in general is not a good thing. Maybe I'll tell you a story. 1 second. Let's see. I have the story. Here, 1 second. That's one story. And I'm writing this down so I don't forget it because I always forget. And the okay. Yeah. Because the main way to reveal this upper will of God and the upper love of God, which is inherent and which is the idea of the Jewish people, the identity of the Jewish people, is only in this physical world. By actually doing physical things in this world, hainu, the Maisa mitzvahs, namely the commandments. Now, only in Judaism are there commandments. No other religion has commandments. Other religions have their rituals, they have their practices, they have their holidays, they have their customs. But Judaism has what's called commandments. Commandments are direct will of God. The direct inner will of God, only for Jews. Putting on tefillin, keeping Shabbat, tzitzit, having a mezuzah on your door. And when a person does a commandment, what happens is batal ritzoncha mipnei ritzono, that you surrender your will in front of God's will. And as you make your arms and your legs and your body vessels for God's will, not your will. There's also what's called prohibitions. There's more prohibitions than positive. Sur mirav aseh tov, turning from bad and doing good. Right? You're really hungry, you want to eat, but you can't eat not kosher food. It's forbidden. You can't eat chicken that wasn't slaughtered in a proper way. It has to have a proper stamp on it. But you're really hungry and you want to eat, and you look around in the airplane, it's empty. There's nobody there. No one's going to see you. No one's going to see what's going on, right? Why not eat it? He says, I can't do it. God doesn't want me to. That's what's called, that can reveal the essence of your soul. That can reveal the essence of your soul. What does it mean? Listen, a Jew can say, listen, I'm not going to do prohibitions because I'm going to go to hell, which could be true. I'm going to do the commandments because I'm going to go to heaven. That also could be true. But it could be true. If that's your motivation, then you're going to have a price. As soon as there's a danger, you're not going to put on tefillin. You're not going to put on tefillin in Auschwitz. You're not going to refrain from eating not kosher food in Siberia, wherever it is. Right? If you're really, really hungry, you'll eat that kosher style hamburger. You're really hungry, right? You got caught in the airport terminal in who knows where, in Dakar or somewhere in Nigeria, and you're stuck over there for a long time, and you no, all they have over there is not kosher meat. Are you going to eat it? No, who says I'm going to eat it? There's nothing else to eat, nothing. That's all that they've got. Are you going to eat it or not? No, I'm not going to eat it. No way. Here, you know what? Here's a sandwich, and we'll take the meat out of it, but it has stains on it. It has gravy from the not kosher meat. I can't eat it. I can't eat it. Well, why can't you eat it? Why not? Here, nobody's watching you. Nobody will see you. It says, because what can you do? That's a test. That's called a test. Right? You have a chance to steal. You have a chance to lie. It's called a test. Are you going to pass the test or not? Who's the boss? God or the world? Who's the boss? Well, if there's some way that I can figure out I'm going to go to heaven because of this, but if there's then I'll do it. But if not, or just have a big desire to do something. Some people have big desires and they could be big rabbis, but they just see that thing in front of them and they just can't hold themselves back. Ramach Mitzvah and the 240, I mean, the classic example is Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam ben Nevat was a genius, a super genius. I don't know if there's anybody ever that was like him. It says when he learned Torah, there was fire around him, etc. But he got afraid that the people that he was the king of 10 tribes. He got afraid that the people were going to leave his kingdom and go down to the kingdom of Judah, where the holy temple was. So he built 2 golden calves. He knew that it was wrong, but he couldn't hold himself back. He induced all the people to forget about the holy temple. And why did he do a thing like that? Because he wasn't able to defy his own nature. How can you defy your own nature, says the Rebbe? That's this 4th level. To have such a tremendous love of God that you don't pay any attention to the world. When you know what's right, you don't care about what's going to happen. You don't care about the future. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your this. That's Abraham, right? The devil is saying, you killed Yitzchak. You're going to lose the Jewish people. You're going to lose your future. Abraham said, listen, I'm not listening to anything. I know what God says. He says, that's what's called this upper flaming love of God, the arousal of the heart. So you're willing to do anything that God says, and that only this upper love of God, this arousal of the heart, can only be achieved in this world. It can't be achieved by a soul before it meets challenges. The challenges arouse inside of us, which that's nature of people, right? When a person is challenged, you always hear these stories about, the grandmother hears her grandson crying, screaming from the backyard. She runs on the car, fell off the jack, and it fell on her grandson's leg. And she runs out and she picks the car up on her own, right? I don't know, was there ever such a thing? But anyway, it's a good story. She picks up the car on her own so that the child can go out. So the car weighs, like 1,000 pounds, and grandma weighs like 90 pounds. How did she do it? Because it was a challenge. She met the challenge. And there's a lot of stories that are like that. And so he says that's also the same. Why? Because the grandmother loved her grandson so much. Here we're talking about a Jew is willing to do anything for God and to risk everything and not to think about anything because of the connection that he has to God. And that can only be revealed by the challenges presented by this physical world. And that's the blessing that Bilam gave, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.